62 days. No crime scene, no confirmed route, no answers. And then a dry riverbed behind a house in Tucson starts producing clothing. First, a pair of pants, then a jacket, then more, all in the same drainage channel, all behind the same house, the house of the woman who reported Nancy Guthrie missing. Nobody is saying it directly, so we will. There is a dry riverbed that runs behind a house in Tucson, Arizona. Most people who live near it barely think about it. It is just a feature of the landscape, a break in the fence line, a place where the desert refuses to be tamed, even inside a quiet residential neighborhood. But for the past 62 days, that dry riverbed has been one of the most important pieces of geography in a missing persons case that has gripped this entire country. Not because law enforcement declared it significant, not because an official press release pointed anyone toward it, but because a man with a camera and a pair of boots walked into it, covered it on foot, documented what he found, and the world paid attention. That wash runs behind Annie Guthrie's house. Annie, the woman who made the call that reported Nancy missing on the morning of February 1st, the woman whose home sits at the center of an investigation that 62 days in still has no publicly identified suspect, no confirmed crime scene, and no answer to the question that Nancy Guthrie's family and this entire country has been asking since that February morning. Where is Nancy? And on March 28, 2026, day 56 of the search, a YouTuber crawling that wash on foot found something. Multiple items of clothing, lying in the same drainage channel where investigators had already been made aware of a pair of pants weeks earlier. The sheriff was notified, deputies were made aware, the find was documented, the photographs were posted publicly for the world to see. What does it mean? What could those items tell us about where Nancy Guthrie went that night? And why does the location, directly behind Annie's house, change the shape of every theory this investigation has been building? That is what this is about. Because in this case, the details that seem small have never been small. A wash, a jacket, a pair of pants, a man who goes back to the same stretch of ground a second time because he knows the terrain changes, and the first pass doesn't always find everything. These things matter, and right now they matter in ways that law enforcement has not yet explained to the public. Before we talk about what was found, you need to understand who found it. His name is Jim. He runs a channel called Exploring with Jim, and he is not a random person stumbling around with a camera. Jim has been conducting systematic, methodical grid searches in the greater Tucson area since this case broke in early February. He carries no badge. He has no official role in this investigation, no institutional resources, no forensic equipment. What he has is a camera, a pair of boots, and the willingness to do something that formal search operations have consistently failed to do in this case: get into the terrain, cover it on foot, stay in it long enough to find what is there. Grid searching is exactly what it sounds like. You divide an area into sections, you walk each one, you document everything you see, and then you go back. Because wind moves things, rain redistributes material, vegetation hides items that were not visible on a prior pass, and in a desert wash where the terrain shifts with every storm system, what was invisible 3 weeks ago can be completely exposed today. Jim understands that, which is why he went back. This was not Jim's first significant find in this investigation. A prior pair of pants recovered from this same wash, the same drainage channel behind Annie Guthrie's house, was a discovery connected to grid searching in this area. That find drew attention. It was documented. It was submitted to law enforcement. And now, on March 28th, Jim returned to the same wash, the same corridor, the same grid. And this time he found multiple items of clothing. Not one, multiple, in the same location that had already produced a prior find. In investigative terms, a single find can be a coincidence. A cluster of finds in the same defined area is something else entirely, and that is exactly what the wash behind Annie Guthrie's house is now producing. Let's talk about where this wash actually is, because the geography is not a background detail in this investigation, it is central to it. A wash, for anyone unfamiliar with the Sonoran Desert and the American Southwest, is a natural drainage channel, dry most of the year, sometimes dry for years at a time, but subject to intense flash flooding during monsoon season. These channels cut through the desert landscape and wind through neighborhoods, connecting distant points in ways that roads and sidewalks simply do not. You can live next to a wash for years and barely think about it. A feature of the backyard, a break in the fence line, a place where the desert insists on remaining the desert. And they are notoriously difficult to search, overgrown with desert vegetation, rocky and uneven. The channel bottom can sit 12 feet from the surrounding grade or nearly flush with the landscape. They narrow and widen without warning. And because they carry water when the monsoons hit, they carry everything else too. Debris, organic material, anything deposited in or near the channel. A wash can move an object 50 yards in a flash flood. It can bury something under 6 inches of silt. It can also deposit something on a clear, dry surface that no one would think to look at until a grid searcher walks it. But here is what makes the wash behind Annie Guthrie's house so significant, and I want you to hold this clearly. It provides a potential route of movement out of the immediate vicinity of Annie's home, without using a road, without a vehicle that would be captured on a doorbell camera, without footprints on pavement, without a license plate caught by a reader, without a neighbor at a window who would see someone walking down a street in the dark. Through the back of that property, through vegetation and rocky terrain, into a natural drainage channel that runs away from the house and connects to a broader wash system that disappears into the desert. That is a route that would not show up on any surveillance footage. And in a case where the central mystery has always been how someone of Annie Guthrie's age could have left a property without being seen, that matters enormously. Law enforcement has been aware of this wash since the early days of the investigation. The prior pants discovery was not the first time the community or investigators were directed to look at this drainage corridor. It has been a point of discussion in this case for weeks, and on March 28th, it demanded attention again. Let me be precise about what was found, because precision matters in a case where misinformation spreads faster than fact-checked reporting. On March 28, 2026, day 56 of the search for Nancy Guthrie, Exploring with Jim returned to the wash behind Annie Guthrie's house and found multiple items of clothing. Based on documented photographs posted publicly that day, those items appear to include a dark jacket and pants, multiple pieces found in the same drainage channel where pants had previously been recovered. The photographs show the items exactly as they were discovered, undisturbed, on the ground in the wash. Jim did not move them, did not rearrange them. He documented them in place, in the exact position he found them, and then he made the call. That is the correct protocol for anyone who finds potential evidence in an active missing persons case. You document, you do not disturb, and you call law enforcement. Jim did that. The find was reported to the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Deputies were notified. Now, I want to be honest with you about the line between what is confirmed and what is not. What is confirmed, the items were found, photographed in place, and reported to the sheriff. What is not confirmed, whether these items have any connection to Nancy Guthrie or to the events of February 1st, 2026. That connection has not been established by the Sheriff's Department, by the FBI, or by any forensic authority. Establishing that connection requires physical collection, laboratory analysis, potential DNA or fiber testing, and an official determination by law enforcement. We do not have any of that yet. What we have is a location, a pattern, and a question that the Sheriff's Department is now responsible for answering. Here is the part that I believe investigators are paying very close attention to: the pattern. This wash, the one behind Annie Guthrie's house, has now produced multiple finds in the context of this case. A prior pair of pants, and now on March 28th, additional clothing. A jacket, more pants, multiple items, same drainage channel, same geographic corridor, different dates. In a missing persons investigation, the clustering of physical evidence in one defined geographic area is one of the most significant things investigators look for. It is how you establish a route. It is how you build a timeline. It is how you take a location from background noise to primary focus. A single item of clothing in a wash can be explained away, blown there, dropped by someone passing through, unrelated to the case. That conversation becomes much harder when there are two separate discoveries from two separate dates in the same confined geographic location. What investigators and what this community now has to ask is this: is this coincidence or is this a trail? When you find physical evidence in a location, you do not just analyze the item. You analyze the location. You ask how it got there. What direction would something have had to travel to end up in this position? What does the terrain tell you about the most likely path from origin point to discovery point? In a desert wash system, items deposited from a specific property would tend to move in a predictable direction, downhill, following the channel. If multiple items are found in the same stretch of that channel, the most logical question is whether they share a common origin point, and whether that origin point is consistent with the property whose backyard feeds directly into this wash. Those are not accusations. Those are investigative questions, the kind that forensic analysis and field investigation are designed to answer. Washes are also commonly associated with evidence concealment in cases where someone needed to move or dispose of material quickly and without being seen. The access from a private property is easy. The visibility is poor at night. There is no pavement to hold a footprint, no streetlight to illuminate a silhouette, no camera angle that captures what happens at the back of a lot and into a drainage channel. If someone needed to move something without witnesses, a wash running behind a residential property in Tucson would make a certain grim kind of sense. That is not a conclusion. That is a pattern that investigators in similar cases have documented again and again. We are not saying what happened in that wash. We are saying that the geography makes certain possibilities worth investigating, and the pattern of finds makes those possibilities very hard to dismiss. People sometimes ask whether clothing found in an open outdoor environment could simply have been there for months, completely unrelated to the case. Yes, that is always possible, and that is exactly why forensic testing exists. You test an item to determine whether it carries trace evidence, fibers, DNA, biological material that connects it to a person, a time, or a specific event. The question of whether something is connected is answered by science, not by proximity alone. But here is what proximity does tell us. It tells us where to look. And a wash that has now produced multiple clothing finds in close proximity to the property at the center of this investigation is a location that demands forensic attention, regardless of the alternative explanations. The alternative explanation is something a forensic result will either confirm or rule out. What the pattern demands is that we find out. The Pima County Sheriff's Department has been notified. That sentence is carrying a great deal of weight in this investigation, and given the documented record of how this department has handled this case, it is important to understand exactly what that means. Sheriff Chris Nanos has been the subject of a formal no-confidence vote, not from outside critics, but from within his own department, his own people. The deputies and personnel who work under him registered formally that they do not have confidence in his leadership. Former Pima County Chief Deputy Rick Castigar, a man who knows this department from the inside, has spoken publicly and on the record about concerns with how this case has been approached. Former Sheriff Dr. Richard Carmona, who held this exact position before Nanos and who carries the additional credibility of having served as a former United States Surgeon General, publicly stated that the crime scene in this case had been permanently corrupted, not damaged, not compromised in ways that might be recoverable, permanently corrupted. Those are devastating words from a man of his standing, and they have not been satisfactorily addressed by the current administration of the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Against that backdrop, the statement that the sheriff has been notified is not reassuring. It is a question, because we have been here before. Tips have come in, fines have been reported. The community has surfaced information and submitted it and waited, and the public accounting of what happened to that information has been incomplete at best. So when Jim found these items and made that call, the questions that follow are urgent. Did deputies respond? Did they go to the wash and physically examine the site? Did they collect the items? Did they bag them, label them, enter them into evidence? Did they cross-reference this find with the prior pants discovery in the same wash and treat the clustering as a pattern worth investigating? Did they involve the FBI? We do not have documented answers to those questions yet, and that is itself a problem, because the public deserves to know how law enforcement responds to community-sourced finds in an active missing persons case. Here is what the stakes are. If these items are collected, sent for forensic analysis, and returned with results that connect them to Nancy Guthrie, that would be a turning point. After 62 days of a case with no confirmed crime scene, no confirmed timeline, and no publicly identified person of interest, a forensic connection between physical evidence and the missing woman would change everything. If the items are collected, analyzed, and determined to have no connection to the case, that rules out a theory. That is also valuable. An investigation is supposed to pursue and close leads, not leave them open and unexamined in a wash. And if those items are not collected at all, if the Sheriff's Department receives this notification and fails to respond with the seriousness that a second clustering of evidence in the same location demands, then that is a story, and this community will tell it. Let's go back to the night Nancy disappeared, because everything in this case radiates outward from February 1st, 2026. And the wash behind Annie Guthrie's house is now pulling us back to it in a way we cannot ignore. Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, reported missing from her home on the morning of February 1st. The call that started this investigation, the call that set off a chain of events that 62 days later we are still trying to understand. What happened before that call? What happened in the hours overnight? Where Nancy was, whether she left on her own or was taken, whether she left at all. There was no surveillance footage that clearly captured Nancy leaving, no doorbell camera that caught her walking down a driveway or a sidewalk, no neighbor's camera that placed her on a street, no vehicle confirmed to have transported her. The absence of a clear exit route for an 84-year-old woman has been one of the most persistent and heartbreaking puzzles of this case, because people do not simply vanish from inside homes without leaving some trace of how they left, unless the route they took was one that surveillance did not cover. The back of a property, a fence line, a wash that runs through residential terrain without cameras, without streetlights, without pavement that holds footprints. In the dark, with knowledge of the terrain, A path through a wash behind a house is a path that disappears from the evidentiary record almost immediately. That is what the geography of the wash behind Annie Guthrie's house represents. A path that surveillance did not see. A corridor that forensic attention is now being pulled toward for the second time. A location that is no longer a single anomaly, but a pattern. When you find an item, you ask how it got there. You trace the most probable path backward from discovery point to origin point. You factor in the terrain, the timing, the conditions, and you build from there. The wash behind Annie's house is now offering investigators 2 data points in that backward tracing process. A prior find of pants, a March 28th find of a jacket and additional pants. Multiple items, same location. The investigative logic of working backward from that cluster points consistently, inevitably, toward the property at the top of that drainage channel. That is not a conclusion about what happened on February 1st, that is a direction that the evidence is pointing. And 62 days into a case with no confirmed crime scene and no publicly identified route of movement, a direction is significant. Something this case has demonstrated more clearly than almost any case in recent memory is the role that citizen investigators and independent content creators can play when official channels have fallen short. Let me be specific about what this community has done. There was the forensic analysis of blood evidence, the donut-shaped drops, the indoor blood patterns that this community and independent analysts were examining in detail long before any official forensic accounting was provided. There was the University of Arizona athletics label spotted in evidence footage by an online investigator who was so confident in her identification that she stated she intended to submit it directly to authorities. That find came entirely from community analysis of publicly available footage. There was the flashlight in mouth behavioral clue, a detail this community identified as a significant marker for a specific type of worker with specific site familiarity. And then there is the wash, searched on foot, in the sun, in the brush by a man named Jim who goes back to the same ground again and again because he knows the terrain changes and the first pass does not always find everything. Not one of these threads began with an official press release. Every single one originated in this community, in people watching, analyzing, grid searching, applying real investigative logic to publicly available information. And every single one of them forced law enforcement to respond, acknowledge, or clarify. That is citizen journalism at a level of sophistication and commitment that deserves recognition, not dismissal. Savannah Guthrie has been the public face of this search since the earliest days of the investigation. As a Today Show anchor, one of the most recognizable journalists in American television, she used a level of platform and media access to this case that is unusual for a missing persons investigation involving an elderly woman in Tucson, Arizona. And she used it deliberately, strategically, in ways that former FBI analysts confirmed were coordinated with law enforcement as an investigative tool. Her public communications about this case have not been spontaneous or purely emotional. They have been calculated. They have served an investigative purpose, and what she has said has carried the weight of someone who knows more than she has publicly shared. Several things she said in her Today Show appearance reframed this investigation in real time. She said investigators had stood over her bed. That is a specific, visceral detail, not an abstraction. Investigators standing over a bed means a defined forensic focus on a particular space, and that matters. She referenced responding to ransom notes, not dismissing them, responding, which means law enforcement determined they were worth engaging with. She described a family navigating something with no clean resolution, a family that has been given information they have not shared, a family managing a public narrative while also carrying a private reality that, based on the evidence now clustering in that wash, may be far darker than anything they have publicly acknowledged. Savannah returns to the Today Show on April 6th. Whatever she says then, and she will have had time to absorb the most recent developments, will be worth watching very carefully. Nancy Guthrie has not been named a suspect by law enforcement. No one has been publicly identified as a suspect in this case. We are not naming anyone here, and we are not implying a conclusion that the evidence does not support. What we are saying is what the geography says. The wash is behind Annie's house. The finds are in that wash. Those are facts. And in an investigation where the central question has always been how Nancy left or was moved without being captured on any surveillance, the geography of that wash and the clothing now found in it is a fact that cannot responsibly be set aside. Here is what I want you to hold on to as you carry this with you. The question that has defined this case for 62 days, the question that has stymied every theory and frustrated every analyst, is not just where Nancy is, it is how you prove what happened to someone when you do not have a body, you do not have a confirmed crime scene, and you do not have a confirmed route of movement. Cases like this turn on physical evidence, not confessions, not eyewitnesses. Physical evidence that places someone, that documents movement, that connects a location to a victim in a way that survives forensic scrutiny and holds up in court. A piece of clothing, a fiber, a trace, the kind of material that a grade searcher walking the same corridor twice can pull out of a desert wash that official searches may have passed over. If law enforcement collects these items from the wash behind Nancy Guthrie's house, and we do not yet know whether they have, and if forensic testing returns results that connect this clothing to the night of February 1st, to Nancy Guthrie herself, or to any person or location relevant to this investigation, then the wash behind Annie's house becomes something different from what it is today. It becomes a scene, an actual, documentable, forensically supported scene in a case that has not had one. It becomes evidence of how someone moved or was moved, evidence of a route, evidence of disposal or concealment, evidence that places the physical story of this case in a specific geography, in a drainage channel behind a specific property, in a way that law enforcement would be compelled to investigate seriously and completely. After 62 days, after a no-confidence vote, after a former United States Surgeon General said the crime scene was permanently corrupted, after every lead that seemed like it might break this open turned into another waiting game, a YouTuber with a camera went back to a wash and found more clothing in the same place. The sheriff has been notified. Now we wait to see what the sheriff does about it. Nancy Guthrie is still missing. That is the fact at the center of everything. She was a mother, a grandmother, a woman who loved the desert air and the quiet gentleness of the city that made her. A woman who sat across from her daughter at a table she had known her whole life and said, "It is so wonderful. Just the air, the quality of life. It is laid back and gentle." She said those words like someone who felt completely safe. And somewhere between that feeling and the morning of February 1st, something happened that this country has spent 62 days trying to understand. The wash is behind Annie's house. The finds are in that wash. The pattern is speaking. And this community, the people who have been watching footage frame by frame, walking washes in the Tucson sun, submitting tips, staying up until midnight, tagging journalists and investigators, and saying, "Look at this matters, someone needs to see this." This community has not stopped, and it will not stop. Not until Nancy Guthrie is found. Not until her family can stop aching and wondering. Not until she is brought home. If you have any information related to the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, please contact the FBI tip line at 1-800-CALL-FBI or the Pima County Sheriff's Department directly. No detail is too small. She is not forgotten, and we are not looking away.